Today, what we're going to be doing is checking out this. And first things first, let's test it out by doing some street photography in and around Cardiff, using it for some POV, in which I'm going to be talking about some of the specs whilst we walk around. But without further ado, let's get into the action.
You can tell by the shoes and down south blues, a smooth cat like me got nothing to lose, cause I'm an outlaw. Hey listen, this town ain't big enough for the two of us, money. Come on. Now if they want that heat, just come through and eat. I got a hot and ready place to knock you off your feet, just like a southpaw. But you cut me off guard with the way you stick and move. I saw you walking in and started straight rock the room with that activity. You got a bright future behind you, baby, I see. Lord have mercy. And then I walked up to you.
Action cameras have become pretty much a vital part to every kind of content creator, and in many cases just general people that want to get great shots and just have fun whilst doing so. They're great for sports, action, but in this case we're going to be looking at it from a photographer's perspective and talking about some of the specs and all of that kind of stuff. When it comes to the Osmo Action 5 Pro and this one, there isn't a massive amount of difference. Of course, when it comes to the new iterations, because they're so close together, usually there is only ever a few things that are different and improved upon in the next iteration and then the next one. This one is of course just a little bit bigger, the size being 72.8 by 47.2 by 33.1, and then the Action 5 Pro being 70.5 by 44.2 by 32.8 millimeters. Overall, the weight difference is only 3 grams, so in the grand scheme of things, it's not really going to take up that much more space, neither is it going to be that much heavier. So I've been out and about for a couple hours at this point, and it actually boasts a 240-minute battery life, which is quite powerful, especially if you just want to set it and really forget it. And that's what these kind of cameras, GoPro stuff, is really all about. Just being able to set it, forget it, and get the shots you really need to be able to fill out that content that you love doing so much. This is a cool shot. One of the other specs that I think is going to be introduced into more and more cameras as we go into the future is changing the format of the sensor. I think gone are the days where we really need a 16:9 sensor, and when it comes to this Osmo, that 1.1 inch square sensor. So what does this really mean? Well, it's designed for being able to create both reels as well as landscape-based content, all from one device. The Osmo is still running, so hopefully we'll be able to get some, good kind of stuff out of it. Overall, this sensor produces excellent image quality, and you've got the ability to take 42 megapixel shots, I believe, for the photo mode. With the advent of things like the Insta360 Ace Pro 2 being used widely for photography these days, I'm not going to be surprised if they do actually end up releasing a photography cage for it to make it a little bit more comfortable in the hand for people who want to do photography. I mean, this is one of the biggest things when it comes to action cameras, is the fact that they're not necessarily best suited for things like my hands because they are so gigantic. I need a bigger camera. So having that ability to maybe use this as a day-to-day photography camera, if it had a cage on it, would actually be quite interesting. Let's move on. I'm right next to the Taff Lake and then the stadium in behind me. And at least I know that this camera is going to be safe because it can go up to 20 meters submerged in water. I may illustrate that by throwing some water at it in some B-roll, maybe, if I think it's going to be funny. But when it comes to an action camera, I know it's going to be a lot safer, and especially considering mobile phones are a little bit more expensive these days, especially if you tend to go for the more expensive ones like I do. So an action camera saves a lot of hassle-free. I don't need to worry about it, and then I don't have the added distraction of the internet to be like, I want to have a look at the next reel. I can just immerse myself in doing some content creation, doing some action sports, but as you can tell, probably not the sportiest human in the world. Anyway, 20 meters submerged, that's really cool. Spec, again, you're not really going to be surprised there, but you got some seagulls just chilling out there. Wish I could chill out. I don't tend to have much chill though. Anyway, next spec. Now let's talk about some of the video specs added to this camera. One of them, of course, being the fact you can shoot 4K 120p. Now you can either use this in the slow motion, but also in the general video mode as well. which is nice and useful for when you want to do some more slow motion shooting. You've also got the ability to shoot slow motion up to around 240p. That's a whole 8 times slow motion at HD. I put it onto the super night mode, and as you can see walking down this arcade, it was actually quite dim. I was impressed with how good the low light performance was here, and seeing other reviews, it's pretty much the same across the board. This is perhaps one of the best super night modes available. One of the main differences between the previous actions as well is the fact that you've actually got HorizonSteady at 4K in here, rather than 2.7K in the previous models. Other than that, like I mentioned earlier, this has got 50 gigabytes of internal storage and is still actually recording throughout this review, which is great for when you want to be able to, which is great for when you forget your SD cards, your micro SDs, and I don't tend to have too many micro SDs. In fact, I only have one good one, which when you're filming a video all about different action videos can actually be quite frustrating because you need to switch it between all of them. But lucky for me, this one has 50 gigabytes. The previous iteration had 47 gigabytes, and then the previous generation had a grand total of zero gigabytes. And I think internal storage for these kind of devices is going to be more and more important as we go along, as it's just super useful, especially if you're like me and you forget the smallest thing that's ever going to be in your camera bag, which is a stupid micro SD card. This is the part of the video where I actually show you the difference between all of the stabilization modes. And I will admit, DJI do actually tend to have the best stabilization on the market, especially for their action cameras. So without further ado, let's go into the RockSteady plus normal RockSteady, and then stabilization test. Now, let's start out with RockSteady now. This is at 4K 60 set to linear, and as you can see, it's pretty stable. It's what would be used day in, day out, and it's around a 15mm. Moving over now to the RockSteady Plus on the linear mode. As you can see, it's a little bit more flowy, lines are nice and straight, it works out quite well, and it's what I'd use day in, day out. And then this is without RockSteady on entirely. Moving in now onto the natural wide, going on into the normal wide with RockSteady turned on, and last but not least we've got the ultra wide. Now as you can see, it's quite good. These are equivalent to 13 to 12mm, and then we've actually got a shot without everything on, so there are no crop factors applied to any of the stabilization. And you're actually able to connect up your DJI mic system to the actual camera itself, which is actually what I'm using at the moment, making it a really great kind of process overall. Having the ability to connect directly to the mic system that I use so often, and a lot of us do, makes the process of creating and grabbing top-notch audio that much more important. So I've got 32-bit float recording on at the moment, and then I've also put the noise reduction on. So this is a test of the camera just in general when it's connected up to the DJI mic. The other thing that I'm actually quite impressed by is as we're turning around here, it's adjusting to the harsh light from over there and then back into the shade here quite well. And with this camera, you've got 13.5 stops of dynamic range, making it just really useful in any situation just to get a shot easy enough. And then this is the audio internal on the camera. What does it sound like? Does it sound pretty good? Although it's not your usual 16 stops of dynamic range that most cameras have these days, for an action camera it's performing pretty well. I am in quite heavy shade here and it is massively bright outside, so of course there might be just a little bit of clipping around about here, but overall from the image on the side of the camera from the front OLED screen, that's pretty well. That's pretty awesome. And talking about screens, let's get into that and some of the menus then. Here it is, the Osmo Action 6 in all of its glory. Let's have a look over some of the body as well. And the first thing I noticed is these new latches that actually open up that have the gaskets on them, making sure that it stays weather sealed. These are a little bit more comfortable than the previous iteration, and that's where you put your micro SD in, and of course that battery. Look on the side there, that's your button to turn it on, and the OLED screen is nice and intuitive. I must admit I didn't actually have any issues with this whilst testing it out. You've got a plethora of different modes here to really use. You've including photo, video, normal, night mode, that give you a bunch of different settings to put in the camera, including your slow motion settings like that 240 HD, and then a bunch of different aspect ratios there as well, allowing you to really customize and use the camera however you want to, changing between the stabilization and the different kind of angles on the lens was also quite intuitive there as well. Now what is great is that the Osmo Action 6 does actually have a front OLED screen as well, giving you pretty much access to most of the settings, but also allowing you to see yourself whilst you're recording. I think this is probably one of my favorite ways of doing it overall, as it's a little bit less kind of like in your face, and you know, that's pretty good. The other thing you can do is actually take off the lens and then replace it with that new manual focus lens, allowing you to get close focus and even to a certain extent a low depth of field with of course that f2.8 to f4 aperture, which is one of the main things that this camera actually has, is a changeable aperture. Now you only have access to the f2 aperture when it's set to auto, but when you set it to fixed, you've only got access to f2.6, and then Starburst, you've got access to f4, and that's what it's set to give that sort of like star-like highlight part to the images, which is, you know, kind of nice. Not something I would use though. And overall, just, you know, pretty good. You do have access to that f2 though if you switch over to the night mode, because of course the camera is looking for more light, so it's going to want you to be set to the lowest aperture. I think the next thing to really talk about here is how well DJI have been doing when it comes to the creation of their new cameras. Of course, the Osmo Pocket 3 is one of the ones I think most people are super excited for. But in terms of like a camera that you can take literally everywhere, it works out quite well. It's a nice size. It clips into this quite well. Still recording. I've been out for a couple hours now, and it's doing quite well. Sorry, Joe, this is probably going to take up the majority of the NAS. The only person that's going to get that joke is, of course, Joe, and anybody that has a NAS. But hey, I'm not perfect. If we, of course, then compare this camera to the other ones on the market, I will probably compare this to the Ace Pro 2, which has had kind of like mixed kind of reviews. It's actually been more favoured as a photography camera, which I think is an interesting reaction to it. Genius move by Insta360 for doing that. The Osmo Action, I think, has been getting more of the glowing reviews recently, and rightfully so. I think again and again DJI have proven themselves as a manufacturer to produce some really amazing devices, and this doesn't, you know, take away from that. Other than that, you have GoPro, and GoPro, I think, you know, their stuff is pretty good, but I do honestly believe DJI is doing it just a little bit better at the moment, and well, it'll be interesting to test out. I do in fact have a GoPro Hero 13, so if you like this video enough, I might do a comparison. Put a comment, like, follow, subscribe. If you want to see more, let me know if you want to see that video. But I'm going to leave that here for today. I'm going to switch over to my photography lens and see how long that this records for. Last time I checked, it was at 60%, and I believe I got like maybe an hour's worth of footage. Yeah,